If we take a look back at the history of the security profession, we'll see that our first mission as protectors was to watch over the assets of other people. That aspect of the job is as important today as it was several hundred years ago. People still count on us to keep an eye on things when they can't. Hello and welcome to the PSTN Basic Security Officer Training Series. I'm Bill Jackson. As with most developments in this fast-paced world, we've had to make some adjustments to the way we keep watch over the assets of others. The threats to assets have increased right along with the other developments of society. Regardless of the target being protected, the basic rules and guidelines for keeping an eye on the assets of other people are pretty much the same. The job requires vigilance, dedication, resourcefulness, and a certain amount of stubbornness. Physical security has two basic components, soft and hard. Soft physical security components consist of the rules and procedures that are in place to protect a site. You have to know them well enough to function within the guidelines they provide, and you need to know where to go to find out more about them should a question arise. The hard component consists of the actual physical things that are part of any effective security operation. That would consist of such things as locks and keys, access control systems, barriers, lighting, and alarms. These are the things that make us different from the police. In a real sense, security is much more equipment intensive than traditional law enforcement. Let's talk about the physical security process. The first term we need to know is threat assessment. A threat assessment identifies threats and determines probability and criticality factors. Here are the steps used to determine those factors. The assets to be protected must be defined. What are we trying to protect? People, property, information, image, how many and how much? At the same time or just at certain times. Loss events need to be exposed. We need to look at the site and identify the events or situations that would pose the greatest threat. Where will these threats come from? What form will these threats take? What is the nature of these threats? What would the warning signs be? Loss events could be bomb threats, floods, fires, or embezzlement. What is the probability that these things could happen? An earthquake may be possible, but is it probable? Traffic accidents at poorly designed intersections are highly probable. Once these factors are known, we can prioritize them. We have scientific means to determine probability. One good example is the crime risk service offered by Cap Index Incorporated. This service uses uniformed crime reports, census statistics, and other data to predict crime at a location. The next step is to get an understanding of the impact that a threat could have on a facility or organization. This determines criticality. A fire could have a devastating impact on a work site. It could cause complete destruction. A stream flood might be a problem, but it's manageable if we have a good plan. A bomb threat could have substantial public relations consequences. A robbery, on the other hand, could be more dangerous. All situations would have a different impact. Let's move on to the next step, which is determining the countermeasures needed to address the specific threats. A specific threat may determine why an alarm system ends up at a certain place and configuration. A certain safe is selected because of its security features. Have you got the idea? Each countermeasure is part of a system that protects assets from specific threats. When the military does an assessment of a site, they like to think in terms of defense lines. They usually break the geography down in the following way. 1. First line of defense. That would be the property line. Are there any natural barriers in place, like a river or a cliff, or will they have to install a man-made barrier like a fence? Signs can also be used to keep trespassers from a protected area. Utilize a variety of deterrents. The approach used can be as creative as the circumstances allow. 2. The second line of defense. This is the exterior of a building or structure. Any controls at the second line are usually difficult to penetrate. Any opening in the perimeter, like a window, door, or skylight, needs to be viewed as a potential way for an intruder to gain access. 3. The third line of defense. These are the interior controls that are in place to protect a particular room or object. It would include access controls, alarms, locks, safes, and vaults. No matter what form a barrier or physical security component may take, we have to keep these simple objectives in mind. We need to define what our property boundaries are. That is, the first steps toward providing adequate security. We need to deter entry for those who are not authorized and allow entry for those who are. We need to delay entry momentarily until proper checks are made. We need to channel and direct the flow of personnel and vehicle traffic in a safe and efficient manner. We need to deploy and utilize our security resources in such a way that we are both effective and efficient. We need to do all these things as tactfully and smoothly as possible. We need to match our defenses with the environment. No discussion of the security function would be complete without looking into the big three. Lights, locks, and fences are essential to our task. They've been used to protect property and people since the security business started. Over time, all three have become pretty sophisticated. They fill a need in our protective design. In certain applications, they can be more effective than people. A good security lighting system has two effects on a security program. First, it enhances security by creating a psychological deterrent. Being visible to others deters criminals. Second, if it's intense enough, light can actually be a physical deterrent as well. Flare projection impedes attempts at forced entry. A word of caution: if you're blinded by the intense light, then you won't be able to see possible break-ins. Generally, there are four factors that we must consider when we look at lighting from a security perspective. 1. Size. As a general rule, large objects don't need as much light as small ones. The bigger something is, the more light it will reflect. So, a smaller light source will work. Bigger may not be better when it comes to lighting. 2. Contrast. This has to do with the shape and color of the object we are lighting up. The more contrast there is in the environment, the less light we will need to make the object visible. 3. Brightness. Bright colors reflect more light than dull ones. Smooth surfaces reflect more light than rough ones. And finally, time. Not time of day. How much time does it take to locate the object in the midst of all the other objects in the area? The more complexity we have in a location, the harder it is to illuminate a single object. Protective and security lighting can be divided into four basic categories. The type of lighting that has been selected for a particular area will depend on the environment, the type of item being illuminated, and the circumstances at hand. The four types of security lighting are: 1. Continuous lighting. This is the most common type. Fixed lights are installed that cover an area overlapping zones of light. They're left on during the hours of darkness. 2. Standby lighting. Similar to continuous lighting, but they're not left on all night. Standby lights are turned on for specific situations or circumstances. 3 is movable lighting. This is mobile lighting that is manually operated. It's usually short-term and used to supplement other lighting sources. Lastly, emergency lighting. Usually contains its own power source and is activated automatically when the other lighting systems fail. This is a redundant lighting system. In addition to the four types of protective lighting, we also have four types of lighting equipment that can be used to deliver light to an area. 1. Floodlights. Now, these can be used in a variety of security situations to cover both large and small areas. Beam widths and brightness levels vary between different models. 2. Street lights are a diffused light as opposed to a directional beam. They can light large areas very well. Fresnel lights shine a fan-shaped beam of light that goes out 180 degrees horizontally and about 20 degrees vertically. These work well in applications where glare could be a problem in the surrounding area. Finally, searchlights send out a highly focused beam of light and are easily aimed. Handheld models can be powerful tools for patrol officers. For more information on lighting, visit the Lighting Institute website at www.lightinginstitute.com. You know, archaeologists have uncovered pin locks in Egypt that date back over 3,000 years. Locks have been around for a long time. There are as many variations on locking devices as there are locking companies. Locks, regardless of manufacturer, provide varying degrees of protection for the locked area. As a security practitioner, you'll become very familiar with the lock system used in your workplace. There are some basic locks that you should know about. They have been around for many years and will probably be here in one form or another for many more. A lock is a device, usually a mechanical one, that secures a door or a window frame into a wall. If the wall, door, or window is flimsy, the best lock in the world is easily compromised. We also have to understand that any lock will eventually be defeated. Just having a lock in place does not guarantee security. Basically, a lock is a system comprised of 3 separate and interdependent parts. The operating mechanism is what turns inside the lock to force the bolt into the door or window frame. Next, the keying device is the means, usually a key, that turns the mechanism. Third, the latch or the bolt is the device that the mechanism moves and what provides the actual protection or the barrier to entry. All 3 components are subject to attack or compromise either as a unit or as individual components. The simplest latch is the spring type. It's the most popular and also the most easily defeated type. The other kind is a deadbolt. It's called that because it does not have a spring that pushes it into the door frame. You have to turn it manually. Deadbolts are better locks as a general rule. With the hundreds of locks and locking systems that exist today, it would take weeks to list them and show you how they work. In general, locks and lock systems can be divided into 4 basic types or styles. Actual usage may vary from place to place. Old locks that are still functioning well are still in use. The types are 1. A lever lock. These are the kind you find in file cabinets, desks, and lockers. They're very low-level security applications. Next, warded locks. These were primarily made prior to the 1940s but are still around today. These are also low-level security. They are the ones with a keyhole you can see through. 3. Disc tumbler locks. These are the kind you find in antique automobiles, another low security level lock. 4. Pin tumbler locks, the most widely used kind of locks in the industry today. The keyway is irregular in shape. The key has grooves cut out on both sides. The locks are very adaptable and come in a wide variety of forms and styles. The more tumblers, the harder the lock is to pick. 7 or more tumblers would be used for high security. And finally, this note: check locks to ensure that they are properly secured, and remember to check for signs of tampering. Fences define property boundaries and deter unauthorized entry. The best fences are those constructed in a straight line. Structures and obstructions should be at least 50 feet from either side of a fence. This will keep a potential intruder from having a place to hide as they attempt to breach the fence. This area is referred to as a clear zone. There are three basic types of fencing that are used to define a perimeter and protect an area. The type used will naturally depend on the sensitivity of the area to be protected. 1. Chain link. This type of fence is permanent in nature and can be designed to look attractive in a particular setting. Most chain link is hung on steel poles with metal hanging hardware. The best chain link fence is embedded in concrete. 2. Barbed wire. This isn't used much, but still some exist in some applications. Oftentimes, barbed wire is used in conjunction with chain link. Usually, it's placed on the top of the fence on a V-shaped top guard. 3. Barbed tape. This is something referred to as concertina wire. You'll see it used on the top of some chain link applications or on the ground inside a double row of chain link fence. A perimeter barrier of any type will provide some level of security protection, but we have to remember that it is not a total defense system. It's a component of a system that must be properly maintained. Every opening in a perimeter is a potential security breach. The more gates you have, the more time you need to watch them. The rule of gates is simple. If you don't need it, keep it locked and check it. And remember one other thing. Padlocks can be tampered with or cut off. Some criminals have cut off padlocks and replaced them with their own. Alarms enable us to protect against unauthorized entry. There are various types of alarms. Intrusion alarms can be broken down into two classifications: electromechanical systems and volumetric systems. Electromechanical systems provide point protection for a door or window. Some are also used as a tamper alarm for card readers. They operate on the simple principle as many bombs or booby traps. An alarm is triggered when an electric circuit is completed or interrupted. Now, volumetric detection systems respond by the volume or mass of a human body. They provide area or perimeter protection. Perimeter protection can be provided by beam systems such as infrared, photoelectric, or microwave. The most common is the passive infrared, or PIR. This system senses infrared energy given off by the human body. In order to provide the most effective protection possible, the security officer should adopt the principles of aggressive protection. Know your assigned area. It's your responsibility to become familiar with the environment that you work in. It's not enough to know just the standard access and egress routes of a facility. Also, you must be familiar with all the potential routes in and potential routes out. Sometimes this is going to require you to think like a person who intends to breach the security of an area. How would you do it? What are the weak spots that can be exploited? What conditions would allow for the easiest entry and exit? Your knowledge of your assigned area should be so complete that you could, if you had to, find your way around the area at night without using a flashlight. You can bet that the people who make a living stealing from others take the time and the effort to do their homework. 2. Assume nothing. There's a saying in the government that has a particular application to the function of a security officer. It is, trust but verify. You are on safe ground in trusting what you're told by your supervisors. You will probably be all right in trusting your fellow officers as well. But when it comes to protecting property, leave nothing to chance. Check and verify the things that you're told. If someone says that a particular area has been locked down, go and see. If you're told that a procedure has been changed, check and find out when and by whom. Written orders and memos are one thing. Those you can count on to be right 99% of the time. Verbal information should never receive the same consideration. It is true only when you have verified it's true, and not until then. 3. Check the barriers. A barrier is something physical that has been put in place to keep people out. Barriers can take the form of doors, windows, walls, ceilings, floors, and hedges. Some barriers are meant to stop people completely, and some barriers are intended only to delay. No matter what type of barriers you may have in your work area, one thing is certain: they are only effective if they are being used properly. 4. Think in terms of concentric rings. Your work area is actually made up of a number of work areas all clumped together. Some sections of the work area are open to the general public and accessible to anyone and everyone. These are the outer rings of your perimeter and are sometimes referred to as the green zones. They would include such locations as unrestricted parking lots, sidewalks, and reception areas. Inside the green zone are the areas that outsiders can be escorted to by workers, but are not open to the general public. This would be places like shop floors, office suites, seminar rooms, and child care facilities. These are commonly referred to as yellow zones. Finally, we come to the inner set of rings, the red zones. These are the areas that are restricted to use by select people in the work site. This would include such places as executive offices, research areas, money handling areas, equipment or document storage areas, any place where there is sensitive or confidential information or property. We need to know who is in the red zone at all times. Monitoring activity in these areas is constant and deliberate. 5. Think hazards. Because it is the nature of our business to focus on those threats that are of a criminal or a quasi-criminal nature, we sometimes overlook the fact that there are other ways for people and companies to suffer. The most basic of these threats is fire. It's your responsibility as a professional to be thoroughly familiar with the fire safety response plan of your workplace. This knowledge goes beyond the basic concept of keeping combustible materials away from potential sources of ignition. Be aware of what types of hazardous materials are found in your work site and how these materials need to be contained. Know the locations of the nearest alarms, what doors to close, and what routes to direct others to take. You need to be able to direct the first responders to an emergency as quickly as possible. 6. Stay focused. Know the value of staying focused on the task at hand. Never lose sight of the fact that the safety and security of the people and property in your area is your primary responsibility. If you stop focusing on security, chances are no one else in the area will be thinking about it either. Stay alert, get your blood flowing, walk, concentrate on a task, or follow up on a call. Do something to get your mind back in the game. 7. Use the tools properly. We have a wealth of equipment available to use. As a professional, you need to know how all tools work, and you need to know what to do if they don't. Your radio is a basic and essential piece of equipment. It has to work every time you key the microphone. Make sure that the battery is charged at the beginning of your shift. Know the dead spots for your radio traffic in your area. Check your patrol vehicles and make sure that they're in good running order. They should be gassed up and ready to go at the start of the shift. Problems with any piece of mechanical or electrical equipment need to be reported as soon as possible. 8. Look to the light. One of the best defenses to protect property is a good lighting system. If you can light an area well enough to see movement inside a perimeter, you can go a long way toward protecting the area from intruders. Lighting is usually designed to illuminate the outside of a perimeter or illuminate the inside area. Barriers are not usually the target of lighting. The area either side of them is. Good light provides a tremendous psychological barrier to an intruder. It creates the possibility of being seen. Usually, this is sufficient. You must make sure that the light in and around the protected area is properly functioning. It should light the target area, but not someone else's property. It should be of sufficient strength to allow visibility, but not so bright that it's a distraction. When possible, the areas of illumination should overlap so that there are no dark passages created in the perimeter. You need to know where the lighting controls are and how to operate the light in any given area. Remember, it's the dark places that look the best to a potential intruder. So, make sure that your personal flashlight is sufficient to illuminate the areas that you need to patrol. 9. Concentrate on prevention, not apprehension. As glamorous as it might sound, catching someone breaking into a property or finding someone in the process of committing a theft or vandalism is not really what we're supposed to be doing. When it comes to protecting property, you must remember that you're in the opportunity elimination business. It doesn't really matter how good the criminal is or how determined. If we have eliminated the opportunity, he will have to go somewhere else. Concentrate on prevention, not apprehension. And finally, remember who you are. There are people who are counting on you to make sure that their workplace is as safe as it can be. They will turn to you in times of crisis to see what they should do. They will entrust you with the responsibility of protecting their livelihood. This is not just a job, it's a calling. Being dedicated to the protection of others is a calling that goes back to the beginnings of our civilization. Remember that. Do your job with dignity and with all the effort and enthusiasm you can find, and keep learning. That's our program on physical security and crime prevention. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time on PSTN.